Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. This week I am answering a question from Piercy, who emailed me to ask me how he can attract high-profile guests to his show. This is a tough one, particularly if you don't have any connections or any relationships already with people that are high profile. It's not impossible by any means, but there are some things that you need to do to set yourself up for the best chance of success. The first thing is that you need to have a really long lead time. And by that I mean a long time between where you're sitting now and your episodes being released. When you're dealing not just with your own schedule and your own commitment, but you're actually asking other people to be a part of your show, and these people are people with a significant profile, they're going to be busy, and it's going to be really hard to peg them down. It also might be tough to get people to say yes. So you really need as much time ahead of you as possible to try and book people, because you're going to need to work in with their schedule rather than yours. You can't say to somebody, I really want you on the show, but the episode comes out next week, so can we do it in the next 5 days because I need to get it up and running? You really need to say, hey, I've got a podcast coming out. Is there any time that you can lock me in? And it might be 3 months until you can get them on board. So it's really important to give yourself as much space between coming up with the idea and actually going live with the show, so that you're not getting to the day before the episode is due every week and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just going to have to get a Tom Cruise impersonator to get on this show because I can't get the guest that I wanted. The other thing to do is to have a really easily definable concept. You need to be able to sell your idea in a single line so that the person on the other end of that email or the phone call thinks, I totally get why this person has approached me and I totally understand what they're asking for. If it's just a general concept that you're pitching, if you just say, hey, I like what you do and I'd just like to chat with you on the show, that's not going to be a very compelling invitation for somebody who has a busy schedule and is obviously successful if you are approaching them. And also it's going to be a bit dangerous for them. It will be scary to think, gosh, I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with somebody I don't know, and we're going to cover topics I really can't work out what they are at this stage. That's going to be too much of an ask for somebody if you are cold emailing. So make sure that you have as compelling a pitch as possible, that it's as specific as possible, and that it really relates to that guest so they know exactly why you're asking them and exactly what you're asking them to do. It might also be worth thinking about having shorter seasons. It's a lot harder to book 52 guests than it is to book 6 guests. So maybe start out small. Send those emails, start making those connections. It might take you 6 months to get somebody to reply to you. So start making those connections and trying to reach out. And all you need is one person to say yes, because as soon as you have one person that says yes, then in the next email, you can say, oh, I've already got this person signed up, or I've had a chat with this person, or previous guests include this person. And then that can give the next person you approach some sense of security that you are somebody that can be trusted, because you've already managed to get that guest on board as well. Whatever you do, make sure that you are looking out for high-profile guests for the right reasons. If you think to yourself, right, getting a high-profile guest on my show every week is going to be the fastest way for me to grow an audience, then cool your jets, kiddo, because it is no guarantee of building a giant audience, and high-profile guests can smell that stuff a mile off. If you head back into the feed of this podcast, you'll find an episode that talks about whether high-profile guests are a good way to grow your audience, and you will find that the reality of how many extra listeners a guest brings in, even if they've got 500,000 Twitter followers, is not as big as you would think. And often the work that it takes to get those people on your show, if that's the only reason that you're getting them on, is really not worth the payoff. You're much better off thinking, who could I bring on the show who has a lower profile that would be much more open to jumping on a podcast, and I can just create really, really good content that people would want to listen to, rather than just trying to hitch my show to somebody who has a lot of Twitter followers. It's not a great way to build an audience, and it's not as successful successful as you would think. So think about why you want those high-profile guests on and whether you might not get better content out of people who aren't so guarded. If you're looking at guests, especially ones that have a media profile, there's a lot of stuff they're not going to want to talk about. There's a lot of areas they're not going to want to go into, particularly with somebody that they don't know. But if you're talking to somebody who might be really interested in pushing a book that they've written or their website, or they're just a really interesting person with a great story and zero profile, you're probably going to get a much better episode out of that than you ever would with somebody who might be a bit more guarded. You really have to think about what you're going to get the best content out of, because people will come back time and time again for great stories and great interesting tales, no matter who the person telling them is. So don't feel like you need to rely on high-profile guests or that that's the only way you're going to build an audience, because you might actually be making it much more difficult for yourself. High-profile guests might not be the solution to your podcasting problems, but if they are perfectly suited to your content and you really do think they're the right way to go, then make sure you give yourself plenty of time, have a really easily pitchable concept, and have patience. Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying the tips on this podcast, please head to wherever you listen to the show and leave a review. I will send you big audio hugs. Also head to podschoolpodcast.com where all the show notes for this and other episodes are, as well as a link to my online podcasting course. I'll see you next week, and until then, happy podcasting.
That's all for today.